These 8 plotting techniques are going to solve most of the structural problems in your novel. Yeah, they're that good. And I think at least 5 out of the 8 you probably haven't heard of before, at least not the way that I'm sharing about them. So let's get started right away with number 1. Placing doors in alleys. So I got this term from Bernard Cornwell, who is a best-selling author of YA historical adventures. What Bernard says is that some of the time you end up writing your character into an alleyway where they are trapped, where they are stuck, and you can't really figure out a way to get them out of this mess. So what do? Well, you create a door in the alleyway, meaning a way for them to escape and fight another day. But here's the trouble. It's not going to be believable to your reader if that door just magically appears. So what you have to do is you have to go back in the narrative and set it up much earlier that there is a door in that alleyway. So that way, when it comes to that point in the narrative, the reader's like, ah, yeah, I remember reading about that before. So let's look at Harry Potter by J.K. Rowling. When you have Harry and Sirius at the lake, they are surrounded by Dementors. That's their alleyway. We think there's no way they're going to escape from this. But what happens? Oh, there's this mysterious figure who appears and ends up saving them both. Later, Dumbledore gives the time turner to Harry and Hermione, and they go back in time, and then Harry realizes, oh, it was me who ended up saving myself. I was the mysterious figure. Now, the reason that door in the alleyway worked and readers didn't just roll their eyes was because Rowling had set it up much earlier in their book throughout the entire story that Hermione was using this time turner to go to all of her classes. So when that time turner becomes the solution to an impossible problem, it feels like an earned part of the story rather than a deus ex machina. Okay, so the second plotting tip I have for all you writers is that you need to splice your chapters. So what I want you to do is to take all your chapters and try to find a critical moment that happens, say, in the middle of it. Then what you do is you split that chapter in 2, and then you shove a couple chapters in between the first part of the chapter and the second part of the chapter. What this does is you get readers on the edge of their seat, excited what's going to happen in this storyline, and then you give them several other tantalizing storylines before you return and deliver on the promise of, okay, here's what happened in that original storyline you were interested in. Hugh Nesba does this really well in his novel, The Redbreast. So chapter 1 features a cop shooting someone he thought was a terrorist. And it ends right after he shoots him, like the second after he shoots him. Then the following stories go into backstory a couple months ago where these Nazis are purchasing weapons. And also we go 55 years back to discover what happened during World War II. So 13 chapters later, not until chapter 14, do we finally get back to the storyline of that cop who shot the person they thought was a terrorist. So basically the reader has been on the hook this whole time, like, what happened with that storyline? It was very interesting, I was totally engaged, and I want to keep reading until I get back to that storyline. Now, can you take this too far? Yes. Yes, you can. Like, don't try the reader's patience for too long. But ultimately, readers really want to see that original storyline, so they will wait, in general, until you bring that storyline up again. And I would love for you to join me in Bookfox Lab, which is my one-on-one mentorship and coaching program. You get a community of other writers, you get a lot of craft talks, you get feedback on your writing. It's marvelous. You should totally click the link below and check it out. I'd love to see you in there, and I'd love to help you with your story. Also, make sure to sign up now because I do have a limited amount of spots, and if you wait too long, I'm gonna have to say no, and I would hate to tell you no. So, sign up now. This next plotting technique is absolutely genius. I think you're really gonna benefit from it. It is number 3, space out moments of heightened danger. So I want you to think of moments as heightened danger as sort of like mini climaxes that occur throughout the book. And my goal for you is to either plot them out if you haven't written them yet, or figure out where they are if you have written them yet, and then space them out really evenly. Because ultimately, this is a good way to pace your book and make sure that there is enough high moments throughout the book that keep your reader interested until they get to the next mini climax. Now, what is a moment of heightened danger? Well, it can look very different depending on what type of genre that you're writing, but let's just look at Reservoir Dogs. Specifically the scene with the Mexican standoff where you have 3 guys in a circle all pointing guns at each other. Okay. Yeah, I think that's a moment of heightened danger. Yeah, clearly. But I should also say the moments of heightened danger can be a lot more subtle than that, a lot more quiet than that. If you remember The Turn of the Screw by Henry James, there is a moment where the governess sees a mysterious figure up in a tower, and we don't know whether it is a ghost, or whether it is someone stalking them, or whether it's just a stranger or something, or whether she is just imagining it all and didn't see anybody. So if you're writing a romance, a moment of heightened danger would be any sort of major major conflict between the two characters who are falling in love, either movement forward or movement backwards. This could be emotional danger. This could be relational danger. So figure out these moments of heightened danger, however they work in your particular story, in your particular genre. I really like this fourth point because some of my favorite stories use it. It is number 4. Add a nested narrative. So I think at some point in your novel, it's a good idea to take the choice to have a little mini nested storyline, which could be, you know, a love letter. It could be a book or movie that your character reads or watches. It could be a story that someone tells. Nested narratives are so great because they allow you to comment on the main storyline in a way that's a little more subtle than, say, explicitly saying like, hey, this is what my story is about. You're using story to comment on another story. So in Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, we get letters, and inside that letter is someone telling a story, and inside that story, someone else is telling a story. There's levels of nested narratives. Or think about Christopher Nolan's Inception. Here we have a dream within a dream within a dream. There's levels of dreams. Or even think about a classic like Princess Bride, where you have a grandfather reading a book, reading a story to his grandson, and then we get to see that story play out on the screen. Now, something that's really great about nested stories is that it allows you to cast doubt on the storyteller. You're like, are they telling me the truth? Is this how the story actually went? And that creates another layer of uncertainty and mystery. One other thing you might want to do is use the nested story inside your story to thematically mirror what your main story is doing. For instance, in Alan Moore's The Watchmen, you have a whole story inside of a story with Tales of the Black Freighter, which is a completely separate story. It really doesn't have anything to do with the main story, other than the fact that thematically it's echoing some of the themes inside the main story. Super interesting stuff. Even if you don't read graphic novels, it's really fascinating to see that technique in use. This next point is a lot of fun. It is number 5, the elbows and knees of storytelling. So I've heard this phrase somewhere and it always gives me a little chuckle. Basically, the elbows and knees of storytelling are transitions. So the danger of transitions, especially if you have a transition between a lot of different scenes, is that it just bloats up your narrative and fills it with a lot of junk, which isn't the most exciting stuff. So what should you do with these pesky elbows and knees? Well, I got 3 different options for you. The first option is simply avoid them if you can. If your character is at home and they need to be at the grocery scene for the next scene, just show them grabbing their keys, and then the next scene, suddenly, they're at the grocery store. You don't have to have them driving to the grocery store unless something happens during that transit. The second thing that you can do with transitions is make them as minimal as possible. So in Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, she starts a new scene with this line. 2 days out of St. Deborah by the water, the symphony came upon a burnt-out resort town. So the transition there is 2 days after we left this town, and then she gets right on with the story. She doesn't even take a full sentence to transition. It's like half of a sentence. It's a dependent clause. So we basically skipped 2 days that were boring and nothing happened. I mean, that's a fantastic storytelling move by her, and you should copy it. Now, the third thing that you can do with transitions is you can make them essential, make them a crucial part of the narrative. So what does a good transition in fiction look like? Well, I think one example would be Harry Potter. Specifically, I'm talking about the transition between the Muggle world and going to Hogwarts. So one option for this story is she could have just cut the scene and then just started up again once they were already at Hogwarts, but she wanted to focus on the journey and make that journey special, which I think obviously was a great move. So in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, the entryway to 9 3/4 is blocked, so what do they have to do instead? They take Arthur Weasley's flying forward and have a marvelous, crazy, wild adventure. But what's absolutely key is that in that transition scene, meaning getting them from one place to another place, lots of stuff goes wrong. You have to have conflict, you have to have tension. The invisibility cloak fails, they nearly get hit by the train, and they nearly fall out of the car. Another great example of a transition scene would be True Detective Season 1. They're just driving from one location to interview a woman in another location. Now, that doesn't seem like it would be an exciting scene. They're just sitting in a car. On the surface, this would be a prime example of the type of transition you would want to cut. But instead, we get this really deep dialogue between the two of them that becomes essential for character building. Rust expounds upon his nihilistic philosophy, and Marty responds with increasing bewilderment and frustration. The next one is a very helpful distinction to keep in mind as you're plotting to understand your book better. It is number 6. Event-driven plotting versus character-driven plotting. Now, I'm not saying, oh, never do this one, you should always do this one. No, I'm not saying that at all. These are both viable options depending on the type of book that you're writing, but you really should know which one you're using. So let's talk about event-driven plotting first. The essence of this is this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens. It is a sequence of events in a chronological order, and characters are just reacting to the situations thrust upon them. A primo example of this would be Michael Crichton's Jurassic Park. We have power fails and fences go down, then T-Rex attacks them, then they trek through the park, then they escape from the rackers, then you have the kitchen and control room chase, and then you have T-Rex to the rescue and they escape from the island. On the other hand, you might want to consider using character-driven plotting as an alternative. Character plotting is basically where one character does something and then another character responds, and so you have this back and forth, almost like a ping-pong match between these two characters. So for an example of this, look at Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. We have Elena. So Elena tries to help Mia, and in response, then, okay, Mia resists and tries to guard her privacy. In response to that, Elena starts investigating her. And in response to that, Mia feels kind of betrayed. Then Elena's daughter ends up siding with Mia. Elena becomes more controlling. And then finally, the daughter burns the house down. So you can see this character-based drama is just going tit for tat between these two characters, each one responding to the way that the other one acts. Just figure out whether your book is more character-driven plotting or event-driven plotting, or, you know, it also can be a mix of both of those if you so choose. All right, we only have 2 plotting techniques left. Let's look at number 7, parallel narratives alternating. So a lot of books use this structure because it is a tried and true one, and I want to give you a bunch of different examples and then give some guidelines about how you can use it well. Parallel narratives are basically where you have 2 main characters and each chapter alternates between their stories. Now, one way to do this is to have 2 different time periods, like in V.E. Schwab's The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. We are switching between the 1700s and a modern time period. But 2 pieces of advice with this. 1, you have to signpost really well. Be very clear to the reader, like with the chapter title or right in the very first sentence, hey, this is what time period you're in, so the reader doesn't feel confused. And the second thing you want to do is make sure there are very strong links between these 2 different storylines. Really, the link between these storylines is not only the same character, but also there are romances happening on both storylines. She has a few flings in the 1700s, and then she starts up a steady relationship in 2014. Another way to use this alternating structure is to have 2 characters each sharing their particular point of view of a relationship. So in The Time Traveler's Wife by Audrey Niffenegger, we have first-person POVs alternating between Henry and Claire for each chapter. And for a strategy like this, it's really important to balance the perspective. Basically, you need to give each character roughly the same amount of time. You don't want one character to get the vast majority of the time and the other one to get shortchanged. Second thing you want to do is make sure that you control the information flow. You want to decide strategically what each character knows and what the other doesn't, and then create tension by exploiting, oh, the readers know that this character doesn't know this information yet. It's a delicious move. You should use it. A third way that you can use this alternating structure is simply to have 2 different locations. I'm thinking of Haruki Murakami's Hard-Boiled Wonderland and The End of the World. So the story alternates between the real world and this sort of fantastical, weird universe that's like a parallel universe. You have the same main character in both worlds, but it's really interesting to see the challenges in the real world as opposed to the challenges in the mirrored world. All right, now let's get to our very last plot technique. It is number 8, juggle all the balls. So say you have 5 different plot threads of your novel that are going on. What juggling the ball means is that you're able to keep all of those in the reader's brain and not have one sort of drop out of the narrative. And then the reader gets toward the end and they're like, what about that storyline? Where did that one go? Now that is bad ball juggling, and we want to be good ball jugglers and make sure every single storyline in our novel, it gets revisited periodically so the reader doesn't feel like it's fallen by the wayside. A good way to do this is simply to map it out, get a sheet of paper, have every single chapter in your whole book at the top, and then on the side write down all the different storylines or thematic elements or crucial objects, anything that you think, oh, I need to make sure this occurs periodically at very even intervals throughout the entire novel. It could be a topic, it could be a character, it could be a storyline, it could be an object. And then you can see visually, okay, are there any big gaps? Is there like a period of 8 chapters where I totally forgot to mention this storyline or this character or this particular topic or theme? Is it a lot of work to do that? Yeah, it is. But I have done it before, and honestly, it was really revealing to me as an author to see it marked out in this way to make sure there weren't any big gaps. Don't forget to check out BookFox Lab if you haven't already. You can click the link below. And I hope that your plotting muscles feel stronger after this video and you're like, yeah, I am ready to face my book again. Get in there, get at it. I'm cheering for you.